We had a suggestion so this summer I've been pulling topics for informal discussions from the social network analysis survey we did earlier this year, and today's I had put on the calendar to be talking about the clean energy economy. That was something that someone had suggested. I don't know who. So I put it on the calendar. We can talk about that, and or talk about other topics. No worries, Eric. But I think
I was hoping there would be some people on the call that have some knowledge or compiling questions related to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act and what it means for our community. I've been gathering little bits of intel, but I sure don't know the answers to the questions, many of them that mean the most to me and therefore may be clean. I mean, I can imagine we can have scheduled calls in the future where people could say more, but personally, I was hoping we get some inside scoop on that, because there has to be some connections to climate literacy, energy awareness, once it's got a climate component and a jobs component. And so anyway, I've made a few notes, but
I think that would be a great thing to talk about in a call. We can maybe touch on it today. We have a during the summer, we usually just have informal discussions, but August 23rd is the first slot for
yeah, well, I meant informally. I mean, I knew this was informal, but just because it was timely.
Like a presentation. I don't know. I mean, if there's anyone can think of that would be good to give a presentation on that, that would be cool too. But
well, I was gonna start with Frank Niepold, since he's inside of NOAA, working at the national level, hoping he could tell us what he knows about what it means for our community. But I'm sure other people also have takes on what it means for our community.
Frank is scheduled to facilitate on September 13th an informal conversation. I could write in that topic for that, or we could try to push that up a little bit if you feel like it's more timely right now, which would be fair.
Well, to some degree, Wendy and Gina, is there simply just looking at whatever the wording is at the time and seeing, I mean, I mean, as far as what's actually in bills is probably the old thing that the people who write them don't even know what's in them. You have
it's 750 pages, so I was not planning on reading the bill.
Yeah. But then there's also, I think we would then recognize within it, hey, that's something that either we are doing, or someone we know is, that there's someone who's working on it. I certainly, the little I've read about the bill is going, okay, well, we're certainly ready for talking about dealing with that. I mean, it's it's not raising like the stuff I've saw. It's not raising like an entire different approach to action on climate change.
I know that there's positive money for NOAA, and I've seen a few bullet points on that, but I'm really curious what it means for this network, like the goals that we've had. Is any of that funded in terms of support for XYZ? And what is XYZ?
I was gonna say too, Wendy, do you want to share what you have learned about it so far, even if
it's pretty minor? And I mean, I just saw it in another publication. It provides $490 million for weather forecasting and research to NOAA facilities. So 200 million for forecasting weather and climate, 190 million for a new NOAA supercomputer, and 100 million for a new Hurricane Hunter jet, which are all amazing, wonderful things. But they don't really speak to education. And that's the piece I was hoping you know, there's probably some much smaller dollar pieces of good news in there for climate literacy and energy awareness that didn't make those kind of bullet point levels. So somebody knows, or as we work our way through the next few weeks, people will be figuring out what that is.
Yeah, I worry that when you put money towards a giant supercomputer and you don't explain why this kind of computer is important, I'm assuming for climate modeling, among other things, then that becomes the kind of thing that is, you know, ammo for someone else to use, right? Why are we spending money on a supercomputer when we could be spending that money on flood barriers, right? So I wonder if education should have a component in this.
Well,
So let me throw something into the mix here. I'm looking here at my other screen and at some email traffic that's been going on regarding a organization I'm on the board for. One of the other folks, this is through Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, the Climate Justice Program. And one of the folks on the board is actually one of the architects, if you will, behind the DNC's climate plan. And so he was serving as, well, in quotes, rapid response and recovery team. He was part of that for the climate provisions on the IRA. And he sent an enormous amount of email because he has actually read all 750 some odd pages. First of all, I think he would be a good person for me to fire off a question to about what folks are saying in terms of educational provisions in the IRA. But he also might be a really nice person to have come talk on these.
Yeah.
So,
I was just gonna say, that, I was just thinking that maybe it would be good for him to come speak. Frank, would you mind seeing if he, is free at this time on Tuesdays?
yeah, let me reach out to him and see what he has to say. I think he would be great. Yeah, it's one of the things is I'm looking at my other screen as one of the emails he sent had to do with Republican amendments to the IRA, which are very interesting. None of which
as
made it
amendments are.
into the final copy. Anyway, yeah, sure. I'd be glad to reach out to Jeff and see if he'd be willing to come chat with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've spent a lot of energy talking about, since there wasn't action at the federal level, what's happening at state and local levels.
Mhm.
And now we have the biggest action we're going to get for a little while on this front at the
Mhm.
federal level. It'd be really nice to understand better what that means for this community. So I think that would be great. And I'm sure more than one conversation with more than one view about vague little bullet lines or what's really behind that could be had.
Yeah, it might be good to have him come speak, and then again, Frank is facilitating on September 13th, so maybe we can have kind of an ongoing discussion about what this means for the climate education community. And I don't know, maybe Frank will join a call before that, but I know at least he'll be here that day. But I think that's a really good point, because I feel like a lot of climate organizations are talking about it, but yeah, how does it impact us? It's not something that I have given a lot of thought to, and it's a really good point. So,
well, maybe we could put it in the context of what else is out there too. So like what, so this, if there is something there, what is it? Trying to identify it, kind of like Carrie, what you were saying, like we have the supercomputer, but as educators, we know we're leveraging that data. I'm just looking at this book that I got from Kelly Lee, that her latest, and it's really tying together the California's efforts, integration of NGSS but also the equity and social justice piece. She's really keen on and an expert in that field. She's a UC Irvine, I think, professor. So there's so many things going on at so many levels, and there's so many resources we know, like within NOAA and NASA, just starting with those two, from an educational standpoint. What does this infrastructure bill mean for that too? So it's just sort of setting look at the whole ecosystem a little bit, and is this an ad, and if so, how?
Yeah, and one of the things is if there is nothing that's specifically education in the IRA, which I would imagine that there's probably not a lot, it does set the stage. Because one of the things I remember from being on a review panel with NSF back in 21 is that was just about the time that they were getting a number of they were very cagey in announcing what it was, but simply saying that there were a number of not edicts, but there was money coming, and there was a number of pushes being put on NSF to really get behind making climate education a big deal. Now, I was back in 21. I haven't heard anything about it since, but I do have the address, do have a couple of emails I can send folks, straighten my tongue out. A couple of emails I can send out to some folks to find out what has happened in the interim.
Well, speaking to things that are just directly at the center, or where the biggest budgets are, the biggest focus are, I would say a lot of it is more directly talking about areas of solutions or action, right? Actions that go on. So what do we have? We have a generation of electricity and energy in ways that don't emit a lot of greenhouse gases, electrification, so that the ways that energy is used is through the electrical system rather than having to power it by burning things, right? I mean, if of course, there's the question. Okay, so and specifically, there's a lot in home retrofitting to make them have their own power sources and to be able to utilize energy through electrification, solar and wind. So those are some of the biggest terms and the biggest things that I saw there. All of them, and Frank has spoken to this, all of them require an enormous growth in certain fields, in certain types of areas. You need more electricians, you need more HVAC people, you need more electrical engineers, you need people who can analyze this, you can need people to deal with roofing, you need people. Okay, so there's all that education, which is the E part of clean.
Yeah.
Where we go. And then I think to me, there's a couple questions that come within it. Is what demographics will fill those jobs, right? Because those jobs are now filled by white men, 97%, right? That's going on. I don't think we're in a position of telling white men they can't have a job. Where if there's anything, it's having white men who do coal to say, there's better paying, safer jobs that you can switch over to this. But we're not talking about you losing jobs. We're looking about, we need so many people. The white men won't do it. And why shouldn't it also be women? Why shouldn't it be people of color? It's not a question of asking white men to give up their privilege unless people just don't want enough to work. So, I mean, there's a question of how do we have education that actually brings in all sectors demographically into it, and also young white guys, right? There's going to be an awful lot of work to do that. We're educators and we have a role in it. I would also add in that I would ask our community, are we feeding this, or are we someone who's trying to solve this? That what I see over and over and over again is that there is a demographic in America that most wants to do something about climate change. One, it's young people, and it's young women. It is just when we're out in society, we see that. We see the most enthusiastic, the most wanting to take involvement. Again, it's not saying that others don't, but that's where we see it. And our society is telling young women that they don't have a role. We say it with reproductive rights. We see it with, it's just, you know, your role, you're too young to vote. The most you can do is carry a sign, but you can't actually do anything. And I think that's wrong. And I think as educators, we can have, it includes ways that people, I mean, one of the things, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but one of the reasons why fields like electrical engineering and electricians, HVAC people tend to be men is it tends to be men who get that kind of experience young. They play around with things, they build things, they tinker with things, they work on cars. That stuff is very valuable, but knowledge. It's not just like discrimination. It's if you don't start young with certain types of experience, you're not going to be very good at a field, and you're not going to want to go in that field. You're not going to be accepted by that field. We need to make sure it starts out young that lots of people are able to be in these fields. And I think educators need to ask ourselves, are we telling young women that they really don't have a role? Or are we finding a way to make sure that they have a role starting young? So that's a lot of what Mobile Climate Science Labs has been focusing on, to establish a very clear example of middle school and high school people, mostly women, are playing a real role in energy that's established and serious. And thinking, you know, we're small, we're not going to find a million roles, but having a way in which they're doing things, starting with energy efficiency first, and through that learning a lot about energy generation, electrification, they're getting real experience of it, and then doing things like at the US Capitol. So that's been our anticipation of things like this bill. That, okay, if you come around that you need to have this, well, what are you telling young people? How are we preparing young people? And of course, it's educators who most do that. So anyway, it's a long answer to, I think, that's to me where it's kind of like a lot of, it's not too mysterious to me what's open for, what the challenge is before us.
I just put in the chat this interesting program that was shared on the Clean Listserv a few weeks ago. It's specifically built for, well, it wasn't intended for young women, but it evolved into being an organization for young women to learn about careers in solar, and empowering them to get the training that they need. I put it in the last newsletter too, just because I thought it was super interesting. But I think it's stuff like that. Don Haas also mentioned, this is just making me think about the workforce development part of things. We had a clean call focused on that a few weeks ago, where a lot of this was shared, and Cornell has a program focused on geothermal. That's kind of workforce development for, I think, more diverse folks. And we have a lightning talk on workforce development that will be happening at the Excel Summit, that it's been really hard to pick a speaker for, actually, because there's so many cool programs happening. And I think maybe that will be, I see a lot of energy behind that these days, trying to empower young people to learn those jobs and those skills. So I don't know, maybe that's part of education with this new bill. Speaking of which, I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm going to mention this pretty much every week until it happens, but if you have not registered for the Excel Summit, please do so. We're working hard on getting this event going, and I'm excited about it. I'll put the registration in the chat. So it's September 22nd and 23rd. I know a few of you have already signed up for it, but it'll be just a big online convening. For the first time, we're getting everyone in the climate education community have their own space together. So it's not just meeting at AGU or meeting at NAAWE or something like that. It's going to be very collaboration, partnership, discussion based. So definitely also please share. We don't have as many registrations as I hope we would at this point. So I'm really hoping people will share it, share with the networks.
Gina, if I may, on that, and the fact that I have not registered is merely having a lot of other stuff going on and kind of just like at a given, it's like major penned in on my calendar. No way I would. And this week I will. So I kind of like, took your, just, of course I'll do that, kind of. So maybe a question would be whenever there's events, I need to look at them and see, is this an event that really among the people in the circle I most directly work with, it's really me who's going to, it makes sense for me just to go and report to everybody else. Because the people I work with, K-12 teachers, volunteers who work at science centers, science festivals and things, and young people, if I have to be careful which ones I invite them to. If I invite them to something that is really nothing for them, or they feel like they don't have anything, then, well, one is I've used up one of the times that they were willing to do something. They only have so much time and they have their other assignments and things like that. But it's also, then they say, well, I guess these, connecting with the other networks and stuff, this is not really for me. So it's my way of coming around to whatever the answer is. It's okay if it isn't, but do we know if Excels is going to be able to make a real place that, say, young people in K-12, actual teachers, not just curriculum developers, would feel, yeah, I really feel engaged here. This was worthwhile. This was a good event to come to.
That's a fantastic question. It's something that when you were a little bit earlier in the planning process, we were kind of struggling with these two paths, doing an event for teachers or doing an event for educational leadership. I would say that this event is more geared toward educational leadership, just because we're going to be talking about funding and partnership building and network. We're going to talk about, we're kind of basing the whole event off of the social network analysis that we did earlier this year. I actually was saying earlier this week that we don't have a strong youth presence. Anyone can come, certainly. I would just say that it's more geared toward educational leaders. The goal was to get established maybe this year with that, and then hopefully it's going to be an annual event, maybe creating a track for teachers in the coming years so that they can be included. So everyone is invited to attend, but I totally hear you about not wanting to use the one, the one chance you can get someone to spend their time on something extra. So everyone's invited, but it is more geared toward educational leaders. That answers your question.
So Gina, great. Thank you. That's an answer. I'm going to say something, and I'm not, it's going to sound like pushback, but I'm not being pushback. It's a friendly comment that I don't think you disagree with either. And that would be if we expand at other times in other ways what we mean by educational leaders. Because the young people I work with are deliberately working to be educational leaders or are proving themselves to be educational leaders. So again, please, I get how we're defining it in this sense, and I'm not trying to change that and do the thing, but just, for them, I'm going to say back, because that's, again, that part of the thing of saying young people don't have a role, is that young people are leaders in education. The way in which education works is young people teach other young people. What students, the initiative by students is a big thing. And sometimes students they're trying to prove what students are capable of, which then is sending a message to the older people. The reason we're not doing this more, it's because of you, not because of us, right? We want to take action. We want to teach. We want to do things, but we're being held back. In our case, we didn't get held back. So anyway, so Gina, please, I'm not directing it at you, and I'm not directing it at Excels, but I do kind of feel the role of, even when I'll do this, I'll come to these meetings and I'm talking to the young people, I get a lot of messages from them and really having a lot of, that's who I talk to much of my week. And then I think, okay, so I'll go to these meetings but I will do my best to voice what you've been telling to me. And that's the stuff that are telling to me is they want to be recognized for what they are, which are among the educational leaders. So,
Mhm.
okay. So please, did you get it? I mean, that doesn't sound like I'm criticizing you. Is that clear?
No, I hear you. And I honestly almost think it would be because students have more, this might be a weird thing to say, but teachers are overworked. We all know that they're overworked, they're kind of overburdened. And students have so much more flexibility and energy to work on big projects. I almost feel that the event would probably be better for youth than teachers. I think teachers could get something out of it, certainly. But partnership building and collaboration is still relevant to you. So I would actually say that it might be more fitting for youth to come than classroom teachers. The thing with classroom teachers is that it's not going to be focused on specific things to teach in the classroom. It's more, like I said, collaboration and network building and that type of thing. Which if they have, some teachers go above and beyond, which I don't know how they have the energy to do this, but some teachers go above and beyond and do work outside of school in educational leadership and get involved in different organizations. And I think it would be helpful for them in that sense. But I don't know, it might even be worth, I want you to know, I had this thought earlier this week, actually, because we were talking about diversity in the speakers and trying to make sure that there was racial diversity and geographic diversity were two things that we talked about. And I was saying to myself that there's not age diversity in our speakers. And I think that could be a good way, maybe a starting point for bringing youth in. There is a group, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but CU Boulder is hosting this climate summit. I forget exactly what it's called, but they have big plenary speakers, like big names, and some of them are these young women that are fellows from Girls Rising Girls, and they look amazing. I'll put some links in the chat. So I actually am going to reach out to them to see if they would be available for a flash talk. And that would be also bringing in some age diversity too. So anyway, that's a lot of
no. And
words,
if I were to comment on that, because I never want to step with the people who most work with teachers. So that's, it's not a trying to, zero sum game, win-win, don't loses, but absolutely, if I were to encourage, say, at least in future excels, whether it's this cell or not, that I think young people would be the next to bring in, because so active on it for so many reasons, are really active and doing things. And then it does have the double whammy that the students we're talking about have all your diversity. They have age diversity, they have ethnic diversity, they have gender diversity, they have geographic diversity, right?
Diverse generation yet, they say. So
if it's a good event, there are at least 3 very good presenters that we could bring in, but I don't like, I would, so I'm just making sure it's the thing of when it's an event that really is ready and really wants it, then I can go to the presenters and say, this really is a great event. It's worth your time. Let's do it. And then they'll say yes. Abigail is one behind me. Antonia is another behind me. And now there's Lily in California. That would be probably her first presentation, but she's itching ready to go. So, and we're talking 2 out of 3 of those are not white. No.
Mhm.
What I'm hearing is a couple, yeah, like, well, one, I just subscribed or enrolled or whatever, it's for Excel, so thank you. But what I'm hearing is that, and it's in a time slot when teachers are teaching, right? So we know that this is not going to be for them, and that's okay. But it makes me think of a couple things. One, just coming out of having been part of the Climate Generation Institute and then having run our own in-person institute, it was really important to me as an informal educator historically, who's married to formal educator. And so I'm very well aware of that side of it and worked in tandem with formal education. But it's really important, the pathway that Jim, you and I have kind of devoted our lives to, that informal side. So there's that piece. So I think but there's also this really cool synergy, because I know, Jim, you'd asked the question about, well, is this only for teachers? When we did our institute, and is by all means, no, this is for anybody that can come. It's, it's a time slot that we tried to make it accessible for teachers, but definitely wanted to open it to any informal educators, including emerging educators. And as you're mentioning, Jim, like, they don't always see themselves in this pathway, right? And they don't have access and they don't have opportunities. So how do we do that? But I think there's also, when we plan things for educators, we do have to think about the school year, and having things like after school. And then there's the teacher burnout, right? You say like Thursdays seem to be a good day, Thursdays after school, or maybe Wednesdays when they have minimum days, or weekends, but then we need to pay stipends because we want to value their time. So there's that side of it. And then the same goes with youth, and then add on the people of color, and trying to really be inclusive. So I think events that are all inclusive are really good, but I think targeting is also okay, and saying, okay, this is the demographic we're looking for this event, not to be exclusive of the other. And if there's an opportunity to bring everybody to the table, all the better, but it's not always going to happen, I think. But just at least being mindful of that is what I'm hearing everyone speak to.
Totally. And I also wanted, does anyone else have announcements? Because I dropped that in there and didn't ask for other announcements in the beginning. So does anyone else have anything that they want to promote or talk about?
Well, I jumped in with the IRA as a possible topic instead of the one you suggested. And so I
What's up?
did that first. And I just wanted to say that Frank shared a 15-page summary with us of what's in that legislation, or it's a near final, right? Like, we don't know what happened to that sausage between the second and but whatever. It's a good overview. And I did a search on it for the word education, and it appeared in one place, and it's training for contractors related to doing the clean energy work. So the summary had the word education in one place.
If I may want to, maybe this is cynical, but it's not surprising to me that a legislation would be more aimed at corporations and contractors. And things. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is that if we as educators need to be, dealing with the hand we're dealt. It's if we're clear that we are capable and we are already doing the kind of work that is required, even if they haven't put pools of money to it, and then the time to bring it in is as the bill comes out and so on. That's the way of saying, okay, so you're going to pull this off without us.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, it lays a foundation for a movement that requires support, and then people. It's all good. I was just reporting on the summary because I was started with.
It's very true what you're saying.
Knows what it has in it, and honestly, just because the summary only mentions it in one place doesn't mean that many of that other work then doesn't translate into supporting activities that need those things to be successful.
Yeah. Well, there's one other thing. The bill does a heck of a lot. I mean, it's not just climate and energy. There's healthcare and a bunch of other stuff.
Prescription and a change in the entire tax structure.
Yeah, and looking at that, it's incredible that it managed to make it with that sort of Swiss Army knife approach. Because one of our problems here in Oregon with cap and trade climate initiatives is that we've been a lot more successful getting it through the legislature when it's small things rather than big things that is a whole package that people have to buy into. So I'm not at all surprised that education's not in there, but I think that it's not going to go anyplace without an educational component from someplace else that's not part of the bill. So I want to throw something in that's not really an announcement, but I'm throwing it in because as I'm looking at everybody's faces, I'm thinking that you folks are going to be in the area I'm traveling through. My wife and I are taking a vacation last part of September in which we're driving down to the Bay Area. So that's Jim and Eric. And then we're taking the train to Denver for about 3 or 4 days. So that's some of the rest of you folks. And I would love to actually meet some of you in person rather than, I mean, Zoom's wonderful in a lot of respects for seeing people, but it's nice to see people in 3D space. So if any of you are, it's the last part of September. I'm not going to get into what specific dates, but if you're up for a visit, drop me an email and I'll tell you what dates and maybe we can get hooked up. And I'm still hoping that I can visit UCAR somehow.
Yeah, I don't know if UCAR is open to the public yet.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't think so.
Okay.
And
but we
sad,
are doing some tours. So drop me a line. Maybe we can still get you for a tour. They're
Perfect.
doing some tours like that. It's just not generally open to everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
and Frank, I was gonna jump all over it and say yes and reach out to you privately, but if you mean the end of September, I'm in Boston, so.
Oh, geez. Too bad. Yeah, I was hoping.
Not
to
that
get-
that's a night, not that that isn't a lovely place to be, but it won't be where you will.
Okay. Anyway, I didn't want to derail things too much, but I did want to take that opportunity to connect in.
It brings up a larger clean network topic, Frank, which is the chance for meetups and how do we, we've used AGU as a meetup opportunity for those that go. And I can't really think of too many others. But there ought to be a way to self-organize
This is
meetup.
another, yeah, that would be really cool because I obviously work team and my whole team is in Colorado, but I actually work remotely from Vermont. So I've actually never met anyone that I work with in person. And those conferences are the only time I get to meet people either. Like I've never met Katie in person. And which is wild, but this was one thing too. I don't know what will happen in the future with Excels, but I personally was very excited about the idea of doing the Excel Summit in person. Granted, that wouldn't be just like a casual meetup. But we decided that, well, especially with the pandemic, but with accessibility, it would be more financially accessible for organizations and certain people to attend online, but I'm still kind of rooting for doing it in person maybe in the future. I just think it'd be really cool. I think there's just something about an in-person gathering, like you said, to see someone in 3D is just different. Maybe you make a stronger connection, and I don't know. I do feel like there are clusters of the Clean Network. Colorado and Bay Area seem to be one. Maybe honestly, I know Tamara's in Massachusetts, and I think there's some other people in Massachusetts. But Seattle seems to be another one. So it's an interesting thought. Little hubs, maybe.
Portland's got a little tiny one.
What was that?
Portland has a little tiny group.
Portland. Is that where you are, Fred? In
Yeah.
Portland?
Mhm. But there's been about 3 other people who've occasionally joined our calls that come from local here.
Tiny.
I mean,
Well, put it on the list of conversations to have, or some way to connect the clean network better would be a little piece of the website to suggest me. I mean, we could use the listservs, right? But it gets a little weird to broadly say, anybody want to meet up on a massive listserv? But it'd be neat if there was a
Sure.
place that facilitated it.
Yeah. Yeah. We can definitely talk about that more.
it kind of makes me think too a little bit about, so, having come out of the Climate Generation Institute, which was an online model, but they then sub-organized the groups into cohorts. So there was the California cohort, which was well represented, and then there were other cohorts around the country. And then there were gaps, places where there weren't any, which is also to take note of. And then we did the in-person one, and we called it the Bay Area Climate Institute, which was probably an aggressive name. Honestly, we had 30 educators. It was really well received, but Jim is putting in like Exploratorium and Cal Academy, and there's so many organizations doing work in the space in the Bay Area that I think the opportunity for a regional, annual event or a summer of climate learning that really ties together all these practitioners, informal and formal, museums, educators, schools, doing citizen science out, at the Bay or up in the Redwoods. There's a tremendous opportunity, and places like the Bay Area, which are kind of a hub of diversity in so many ways. So there's all of that, I'm thinking about, you're making me think about that. And then there's this weird thing of like, do we plan an in-person event? Do we plan a virtual, or what about the hybrid? And everyone's like baffled by the hybrid, because it's like, well, I want to Zoom these people in, but then I got to make technological plans for that, so it's like,
It's
but
a
it's
messy.
yeah, I've seen it work a couple of times, effectively, but not, you definitely got to know your tech, and you got to be inclusive of the screen people, right? And the in-person people. So yeah, hard, like you're saying, Wendy, challenging, but a good challenge.
And Eric, by the way, just a chance. Thank you so much for the Bay Area Summer Institute. It was quite, you arranged for me to be there. It was quite good. And really good always to check in. We'll see what the teachers are. Most, I guess, primarily it was from Oakland and San Leandro, and San Leandro is not something I connected with. Something just to kind of reflect on and things. There's what CRS and Otaka do, which is fantastic. It's at some point there's like comparing notes of those two organizations and us work from the outside, the inside, the middle with Oakland. It's always difficult with the Oakland district, which has deliberately gotten in the way of doing certain the things we want. I mean, things that I've set up with mid-level people at the district, so it's all ready to go, and then someone from the top basically shuts it down. That's a difficult thing, right? And now for what I do, I'm used to getting brick walls, and I'm used to getting wide doors that are wide open, and I'm used to using the wide open door to go after the brick walls. And so, it doesn't really phase it. You just shift, but it's really tough on people. And one of them is the attitude of the district of, if you have local climate specialists, are they welcome? Are they encouraged to come into the classroom or bring that, or are they discouraged or actually stopped from doing it? And that's one of the things that's really difficult when you get at the district level. And yet, Oakland, I mean, the same person who was shutting us down from the top was kind of like bewildered by how, okay, I don't like that you guys teach in primary school about the fundamentals that get into climate change. That was one of the things why they didn't want us doing this, because we believe that you can teach things like energy and heat and movement and the things that are NGSS as precursors to climate change, right? And get it in elementary school. And then to find out that there's elementary school teachers in their district who are teaching our stuff to other schools. It's like, wait a second, not only are you in our schools, but you've got our students and their families teaching what you teach. You know, something like your brick wall isn't working, right? But you can't, but doing it officially and with the district level. Anyway, I don't know how much that's a thing other places are encountering, but you know, things kind of come top down. And it was like on this theory that most people consider is wrong now, I think, that NGSS does give room for climate change in the elementary school level. It just, you don't call it climate change yet. You go at these other fields. So that idea of blocking anything about this, that may be what Chevron wanted, but it's not what NGSS really says.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jim. And it's that sort of dynamic tension of, because with Oakland, for example, just taking, and Berkeley now too, I'm learning about Berkeley. I mean, they have positions within the districts for sustainability managers, which are completely outside of education. It's facilities, right? So you got that. Then you've got environmental kind of coordinators and curriculum coordinators. And even within Berkeley and Oakland and now LA and others, I'm sure you have these resolutions at the board level saying they absolutely want K-12 climate education, you know, embedded in the curriculum. And then you've got like Kelly Lee's book and showing the tremendous connections that you're mentioning, Jim. She's talking about secondary, but they're there, as you said, at elementary. So everyone wants this, but then you get the sort of some of those pushbacks, which are, well, it's not quite in my job description, you know, or it's out of my area. Like as a facilities sustainability manager, I don't really do education. That's somebody over here. But then to do it right, you've got these facilities with solar panels and gardens and water conservation things that you've put in. And now you've got a school that's modeling sustainability for the students. And you could have internships where they're actually managing all of these things and learning how to become a solar technician or learning how to become somebody that installs drip irrigation, or, you know what I'm saying? It's like the synergy between the two, the whole is much greater than the parts, but then you need that upper level buy-in, that administrator, that enlightened administrator that says, absolutely, we're all on the same path. And there's some exciting things happening in the Bay Area around this, where there's a woman named Jill Buck. I don't know if anybody, you know her, she's Bay Area, but she's going meticulously district to district throughout the Bay Area.
Sorry, Eric, is that BOC or BA?
UCK.
Okay, thank you.
Jill, and she's like training, doing trainings for district administrators to talk about sustainability in this holistic way, in a facilities context, in an educational context, and I think bringing them together, you know. But it's challenging because you do run up against those brick walls, Jim, and it's real and it's hard, and it's, unfortunately, it seems like you need that person that's really listening at the right level sometimes to holistically make things happen. I mean, and not, the grassroots is super important. The champions at school sites, if you've got a principal that happens to be a champion of it, then things happen at that school. Anyway, yeah, it's a whole thing to unpack.
and there's also just sometimes it doesn't, they have to be leaders or they have to make it happen. Just don't stop it. Right? I mean, if we're teaching NGSS, if the kids love it, if the parents love it, if it's bringing you money, why do you want to stop it? And yet you go out of your way to stop it.
And to me, that's distributed leadership. That's like a leadership model too. It's like saying, I trust my team to make, I mean, maybe don't have bandwidth, or there's other, you know, things that are more pressing for me as the superintendent of a district, but I get that you're a principal at that school. This resonates with your community, go for it, as opposed to being a roadblock, right?
And happily, San Francisco is not quite. San Francisco has got the same whole sustainability sections and things, and I have not seen the from the top down trying to stop it. It's like things are freer in San Francisco. I mean, one of the easy ones is to go to the science nights. If in fact, the district will invite us to those, they'll get a message, you know. I don't know if people are familiar with those. So typically at the elementary school level, they'll have one night a year where they'll just bring people in, or families will bring things, and you'll do science. It's like a little science fair, but it's for the school. And then we'll usually get an invitation from the school district of, can you bring the mobile labs to us? And sure, and of course it's great. So the one of just noting one of the, whether it's a fake argument or a real argument, but one of the things, using again Oakland as an example, is what it was is, okay, we wanted, if we want to do something about climate change, or we want to do on substructure, it has to be something that can immediately done in every school in the district. Okay, if you have a lab, you have to have it for the entire district, and it's kind of understood that's just going to kill it, because nothing goes from without a pilot program. Nothing goes with stepping up. It's like, you can't, that's just not going to happen, right? You're going to have some teachers are interested, and why should it happen? You don't have to have we don't have to have every school kid in America be a leader in climate change to make a gigantic difference. If we have 1 million kids out of the tens of millions of kids active on climate change, I think we're going to solve this thing. It's not going to take that many, But then when we came back, we had a way that it was available to every school in the county, in the district. Well, then they shut that down. They moved the goalposts on us. But that's one of the arguments that the public schools will make, is it's kind of on the using the idea of like equality, but equality actually to take away, right? So that all of Oakland won't get it now. And anyway, that was one of the arguments. And so, I mean, working with the TACO and CCRS, one way or another, you all are everybody's dealing with that, right? That kind of feel.
One other thought came to mind, but I want to make sure Melissa and Carrie, if you all had anything wanted to share too, because I know we're almost at the end.
No, I'm listening to this discussion and I am, just enthralled by it. I think there's a lot of really good ideas being thrown around. I think, I always appreciate what Jim brings to the table as far as his experience with districts, and he's on point. I mean, the excuse of equity is often used as a reason not to provide something to a district. One reason, but yeah, it's hard out there. But no, I don't really have anything else to add other than that little comment. Thank you for opening up.
The one last thing I might add is, with this, we've talked a little bit about the 10 Strands project, working with San Mateo County Office of Ed to create a curriculum that will be K-12. But my fear, I think the team's fear is it's another thing that gets created and then stuffed on a shelf somewhere, that people can choose to use or mostly don't. So I think we're really trying to be mindful of making this accessible to all, usable, really seamlessly kind of tie to what teachers are doing, so it's not an ad. And hopefully, because there's this groundswell of interest at these sort of district level, like folks saying we want this type of education in our curriculum formally, hopefully between that and the way it's designed, it'll get used, and I think it's just starting. So I think that would be a fun topic to check in with Amy, Amy Frame and Karen Cow at 10 Strands occasionally, in future calls, because it's a great, I'm learning a lot by being part of the project. I think it's a great value.
I think 10 Strands is great. We're also, Lynn has been working with it as well. I guess my big thing is like what you just said, Eric. I want to, repeat it, is it just one more thing that we're adding to this web of already available curricula? And in the conversations that I've had with teachers, the thing that keeps getting said is professional development, that they don't feel confident using curricula without the professional development that goes along with it. And the tipping point for a lot of teachers is it's one thing to read a teacher's guide, but to actually do the activity. One of the things to consider is providing some kind of webinar, like on-demand webinar that teachers could watch in order to get professional development on demand. Something that's flexible for them, but still allows them to see something, to reach that tipping point where they'll actually use it, as opposed to just, like you said, being one more thing on the bookshelf. I'm very hopeful for the 10 Strands project. I think that there's a lot there that has so much potential. And I guess, we'll see.
I just put this in the chat. I think that especially encouraging to hear that teachers are looking for PD and support on how to use resources, because we do tons of webinars, but we have a problem where we have low engagement because I don't think we have many teacher contacts, and we're always trying to grasp at new ways to reach teachers. But that's just a clean problem. But anyway, Clean at least is always trying to do more professional development, but I don't know, it's hard. Teachers are stretched very thin, so it's difficult. But any other thoughts?
No, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for hosting again. Good to see you all again. It's been a lot of irons in the fire right now, so I'm in and out of the weekly calls at the moment.
Yeah. And that's a good point in the chat, Carrie. Also maybe something to talk about in a future call. But thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you later. Thanks all.
Bye. Have a good.
Thank you.